Hello, good evening. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about academic writing. Academic writing is what you need to get into a college or a university, especially one that is abroad, such as Australia or New Zealand or England or America. Academic writing is the more complicated of the two types of writing. There is also general training writing, but academic writing is perhaps the most difficult of the two. Anyway, let's move on. I'm going to give you some tips and ideas. General tips. Okay, for task 1, you got about 20 minutes to do the job. You have to write a description of a chart, table, graph, or diagram for the academic test. Okay. Now, the first thing you have to do is look at this chart or graph very carefully. Try and understand what it's about. Make sure that you know what the low points, the high points are, and so on and so forth. Now, for task 2, you got 40 minutes. This is obviously worth more marks. This is an essay of at least 250 words. Now, for task 1, you have to do at least 150 words. Okay, and it's a response to a statement and task question. It's often an argumentative essay where you have to give 2 points of view, those for and those against a specific statement. It might be something like, well, do you think that nuclear power is the only energy that we should use? You might agree or disagree. Now, general writing strategies. Well, there's quite a few writing strategies. Obviously, you have to try to understand the task requirement. Read the instructions carefully. There's 2 things. There's a statement and then there's a question. Okay, the statement might be something like, well, many people in the world believe that we should spend more time looking after the world and less time trying to become millionaires. Now, the question might be something like, well, to what extent do you agree or disagree with this statement? Okay, so try and understand both aspects. Then learn the basic structure of an argumentative or opinion essay. It's quite straightforward. It's usually introduction, 1 to 3 paragraphs, and then a conclusion. All right? Now, always do a rough plan with a list of ideas before you start to write the task essay. Okay, so have some scrap paper with you or someplace where you can make a rough plan and a list of ideas, and even main points and supporting details or examples. Familiarize yourself with descriptions of data. So when you're looking at graphs or pie charts, you need to know the kinds of language that are used. The best way to learn about this kind of language, aside from taking an IELTS course, is to look at financial magazines or newspapers and textbooks. Now, practice generating your own ideas on topics. Look at a variety of topics and try to come up with some ideas. It's important to have general knowledge. People with general knowledge are usually more intelligent. Do as many test papers as you can. So, do a lot of practice test papers. You can get test papers, books from most bookshops, IELTS test papers. Now, the next thing is you have to try to manage your time well. Pay attention to word count. All right, at first give yourself something like half an hour to do the 20-minute task 1. Then try and reduce it to 20 minutes, step by step. The same thing with task 2. Give yourself perhaps an hour to start with, but then try and reduce it down to 40 minutes. And do pay attention to word count. If it's slightly over the word count, that's fine. But if it's under, you could get penalized. Okay, task 1 tips. Do not copy words or phrases directly from the question. Okay, don't just directly copy anything from the task. Okay, you have to paraphrase. You have to use words that are similar, or you have to rearrange the word order. Then familiarize yourself with words and phrases for describing graphs, diagrams, and charts. Okay, we've already mentioned this. What kind of words are we talking about? We're talking about words like a sudden drop, increasing slightly, a decline in the sales of cars, these kinds of things, okay? Now, do not try to describe everything in task 1, all right? You have to be selective. All right, don't just make a list of numbers, 40%, 50%, 60%, all that kind of stuff, or 10 million, 50 million, 30 million. This is not about an account of numbers. You have to choose some numbers to support information and special features. Select only 2 or 3 features. These might be things like the high points, the low points, or points where the two graphs combine or align or compare. Okay, as I've said, do not quote long lists of numbers and figures. Select and highlight comparisons and contrasts only. So, differences between, let's say, American car sales and Japanese car sales. Make comparisons, make contrasts. Do not take more than 20 minutes. Okay, when you're actually doing the test, you should not take more than 20 minutes. The introductions and conclusions should only make general statements. No numbers are necessary. So when you finish writing task 1, you have to speak in general. Talk about main differences, main ideas, overall comparisons. Okay, don't give any details. In the conclusion must be a general statement. And finally, do not forget to leave time to check your essay. Give yourself a couple of minutes where you can go over your essay and see if you've made any grammatical, spelling, or punctuation mistakes. Now here are some sample diagrams for task 1. See, we've got a table on one side, and you have to look at this table, analyze it, and then discuss it. Okay? So we've got like 3 names or 3 university names, and then we've got dates and so on and so forth. So you can talk about universities, you can talk about dates, you can talk about the number of students or the number of graduates from those universities at different dates. Then you see we've got a graph. Now the graph is usually at least two representations or 2 symbols. It basically, you usually have one line which represents one company or one radio station or one country, and another line which represents another country or radio station or whatever. And they are compared, and sometimes they overlap, and sometimes they are separate. And you have to analyze this graph and make comparisons. The interesting points are where they are similar, or where they overlap, or where they peak, or where they fall, the lowest point. And the other interesting point to consider or feature is where they start. Okay, now this may happen over a period of time, or it may happen over periods of a few years. It may happen in decades. Who knows? It may even be over centuries. So make sure that you note the time period and use some references to it. But don't just write a whole bunch of numbers. Just choose 1 or 2 features and then write the associated time period with it. Now there's also flowcharts, okay, which show how the procedure of things, how things are done, how the process that is involved. And you have to look at the flowchart and then write, nice sentences about the whole process from the beginning to the end. What happens first? What happens second? Why does this happen? Is there a special name for some of these processes? Okay. And then there's bar charts, which in some ways are similar to graphs. They usually compare 2 or 3 features. For example, they may compare employed and unemployed people, or males and females going to university, or things like that. Then you could also get a diagram. It could be a diagram of a machine. It could be a comparison between 2 islands before and after tourism. And then there are pie charts. Now, pie charts generally have a percentage associated with them. So you'll get like maybe a quarter of the pie chart, or a sector maybe would be considered like 25%. And it might represent something like, agricultural farmers in China. Anyway, usually you get 1 or 2 pie charts, and you have to compare and show how things change, or you have to show which is the minimum, which is the maximum. And it might have something to do with cause and effect. So think about it. Look at the factors, look at the percentages, and make comparisons. Lowest, highest, the most progressive, the things that have changed the most. Those are the kinds of features you look at. Okay, now here's some of the language you can use in a graph. If you look at the one to the left, we've got peaked, and this is often the highest position. We can say something like, well, the sales of cars in Japan peaked in 1991, as an example. Other words that mean drop, fell down, plummeted, plunged. This means to fall down dramatically, okay? Dropped sharply, dropped significantly. All these are connected to a loss of sales or a loss of interest or the reduction of the company employees or something like this. Okay, if we look at just after the peak, you've got something that's described as leveled off. So this is a period of stabilization. This is when things begin to be pretty much straightforward without fluctuating, without going up and down. And then directly after that, we've got decreased. Now you can decrease slightly. In this case, in this particular graph, there is a slight decrease from what period? 1995 to the year 2000. Or you can also say a gradual decline. Okay, these things all mean slow or slight. Now, if we look at right at the beginning, it says increased or rose. Now, in this particular case, from 1990 until 1991, the increase is dramatic. So we can say it increased significantly. Now, we're not sure what we're talking about here because we haven't got people or we haven't got car sales or we haven't got something, but it could be any of those things. You can also use rose significantly or rose sharply. Okay, that's fine. So here are some classic sentences or typical sentences for descriptions of graphs. Okay, here's one. In 1991, the company income was at its peak, reaching a figure of almost $100 million. From 1991 to 1992, the company earnings plummeted. So they weren't very profitable during that period. There was a lack of sales, and there was a sharp lack of sales. It changed quickly. Now, from 1992 to 1995, the income leveled off. So this means that there wasn't any dramatic increase or decrease. It just basically went ahead steadily. Now, after 1995, the company's profits declined gradually. Okay? So the company's profits, this is the amount of money that they made after sales and expenses. Okay. Now let's look at task one, the language of change, the pie chart. Now here we've got things like percentages. Now, and each of these colors or shades represents something. They represent, for example, we've got a medium gray represents the Samsung, we've got a light gray represents Nokia, and then so on and so forth. And each of these companies, is responsible for so many sales, we presume. Let's talk about smartphones, for example. So we can say that, well, Samsung has the largest percentage of sales in smartphones. You can see they have almost half of this chart, almost 50%. Now, these parts of the circle are called sectors or segments, okay? When they look like a pie shape, for example, the two 19% areas, we call them sectors. When they are like the 48% shape, then we can call it a segment, okay? All right, task one, some sample phrases. So we can say from the figure or from the chart or from the diagram or from table 1 or from figure 2, it may be seen that Samsung, for example, has the greatest sales. Or it may be estimated that or calculated that, okay? Or it can be seen, or it can be shown, or it can be inferred that. These are typical statements which you will use when you're describing pie charts and what they represent. You can also just go directly by saying something like, well, figure 1 shows that, or the graph shows that. Okay, task 2. This is the 40-minute essay, usually the argument essay. Okay, Now, sometimes it's just an opinion essay where you may just completely disagree with something and explain why. Or you might completely agree with something and explain why. But usually you're asked to look at two sides of an issue or a modern day problem. Okay, now, the first thing is you have to be aware of the structure of these kinds of essays. The structure is usually the following one: introduction, main body, and conclusion. Now, the main body is 2 to 3 paragraphs, and that's where you put your arguments for and against. In the introduction, you more or less paraphrase the task question. And in the conclusion, you should speak in general and also give your opinion. You should only give your opinion in the conclusion, in fact. Now, the introduction usually takes 2 to 3 sentences. And as I said, it paraphrases the task question, or it changes the word order so it doesn't look like it's an exact copy. The body is usually 2 paragraphs expressing arguments for and against an issue, but can be up to 3 paragraphs. The conclusion restates the topic question and the writer's opinion. Okay, a quick general guide. As we've said, study the question carefully. You always have to do that. Underline the key points. What are the key phrases and the key words? Then quickly brainstorm the topic. You should use a rough draft to help you list ideas. Just get a scrap of paper and list your ideas. What do you know about the topic? What ideas can you come up with regarding the topic? Can you think of any arguments? This is what we call brainstorming. Now, then select the main points and supporting details or examples, okay? So, deal with the main points. Don't get sidetracked or carried away with unimportant things. Just deal with the main points. I believe this and this for this reason, and in my experience, I have seen that Give a supporting example. Just deal with main points and supporting examples or extra or additional details. Now, organize your points in this structural format, okay? If you can, try and have a list. Arguments for, arguments against. And then perhaps you can write something like supporting details or supporting examples. Now, adjust the structure according to the type of essay. So remember, now adjust the structure according to the type of essay. Now, if it's a for and against argument, you're basically going to have 2 big paragraphs. If it's an opinion essay, you're probably going to have 3 paragraphs. It's possible to have more, okay? So make sure that you understand the task and you use the correct structure. All right, here's a sample essay plan. This is what you might write on a scrap of paper or on your notebook or whatever. Okay, you might say something like, you might have 2 sides. One side for, and then you have point 1, point 2, and point 3, plus supporting details or examples. Then the other side might be, then you might have against. Argument against 1, argument against 2, argument against 3, plus supporting details or examples. Now, another kind of argumentative essay is advantages and disadvantages. What are the advantages and disadvantages of electric cars, for example? Again, point 1, point 2, point 3, plus supporting details or examples from your life experience. Same thing with the next one, disadvantages. Now, here are some argument phrases. So it's good to familiarize yourself with certain phrases which help you to introduce an argument or explain an argument or disagree with something and so on and so forth. Okay, for example, we've got, it can be argued that. Okay, this suggests that there is an argument against this or for this. Now, you might disagree with that, but there is an argument for or against it anyway. An important argument here is that. Okay, so this is where you're signaling that you're going to give one of your important arguments. Another signal for an important argument, all the evidence points to the fact that. Now here you're using an important argument to support your beliefs. Now, more generally, or to show an opposing view, you might make a statement like this. Well, it is widely believed that, animal testing is cruel, for example. So here you might be stating the opposing opinion, which you probably disagree with. Now, another statement is something like this. Most people consider that. Okay. All right, so that's what most people in the world think or believe. That's their problem. Now, it is generally agreed that, so this is another general statement. This is something you might say about the people who are opposed to this argument or maybe disagree with you. And another way of talking about this is the consensus is that. This means most people believe something, okay? Now, another statement, most people would agree, or most would agree that, for example, experiments on animals are cruel. Now, it may be the case that, now in this case, you're considering an opposing point of view, something you probably don't agree with, or something that perhaps you feel is important to mention or should be considered. So when you say it may be the case that, you're adding an extra argument, perhaps for the opposing view. The same thing with the next one. It is possible that. It is possible that in the future something might change. Okay, for example. All right, a few more. Now I'm just going to read through these. I'm not going to explain them too much. One argument is that, okay, clearly you're indicating one argument. There is some evidence that. Now in this case you're introducing or suggesting evidence, which means you must have some supporting information or experience. Okay. The next one, it is perhaps the case that. Here you're speculating. You're saying maybe this is the case, or maybe this is what some people think, but you're not really that sure about it. Now, it has been suggested that, okay, perhaps by some experts or by some professors or by some people who might know something about this particular topic, they have suggested that this may be the case, or this may be a theory that's important, or even that something may never actually change. Now, some would argue that, again, here you're expressing somebody else's point of view, and here very directly, there is a view that somewhere in the world, somebody believes that there is an argument about this particular case, and perhaps it's an unusual view. All right, it seems clear that, or it seems clear there. Okay, this means that you're pretty sure about something and you've got strong supporting points or evidence or examples for it. It is likely, or it is highly likely that, again, you're pretty confident about your opinion and you must support it with strong details or reasons or examples. This appears to prove that, okay, in this case, you're saying that if we follow this argument and if we look at these examples, this is the most likely conclusion. You're beginning to introduce a conclusion of some kind. Now, it is logical to include okay, well, here you're saying that, there is not only circumstantial evidence, it's not just a matter of people's opinions. Here you're saying it is actually logical. It stands to reason. It can stand the analysis of intelligent people like scientists. Okay, a few other useful phrases. In recent years, okay, very simple. We're talking about the last 10, maximum 50 years, okay? All right. It is very important to bear in mind that, okay, here you're introducing an important point that you feel contributes towards one argument or against it. There has been a great deal of discussion about. So this means it's a popular topic. It's in the newspapers. You've seen it on internet. There's people discussing it. There seems to be some interest in this topic. You can say it's topical and trendy and perhaps something that's in the news in the recent times. There is also the need to consider, here you're suggesting that there are other points of view to be looked at, not just the main points. There are other aspects, other facets of this issue which really should be analyzed. Now, when you say, I now turn to the problem, or I turn now to the problem of, here you're signaling that you're going to now talk about another reason, or you're going to talk about the opposing view. So you're signaling a slight change in your thinking or in your writing. perhaps the most obvious advantage, disadvantage of something is that. Okay, I think that's straightforward. The most obvious advantage of something is this. Okay, it is worth remembering that. Now here you're using this phrase for perhaps a supporting argument or a supporting example to support your main argument or point. A useful starting point for this discussion is the problem of, okay, well, obviously this is a starting point. This is the kind of phrase you might have at the beginning of a paragraph. All right. It would be useful to identify the main reasons for, okay, again, near the perhaps in the introduction or near the beginning of a paragraph. So it would be useful to identify the main reasons for this issue. Okay, it's kind of an unnecessary sentence actually, but anyway. A further argument in favor of, okay, this is like saying additionally, or introducing perhaps some supporting examples or arguments. Ultimately, if the government addresses the root of this problem, the solution will come. Well, okay, good. This is identifying those who are responsible, and also saying that the root of that the problem has causes which go back a long way, or has deep roots. Okay, and suggesting that some kind of solution has to arise from these people, and these people are responsible. Okay, some contrasting phrases. Contrasting phrases are usually, they indicate two opposing sides of an argument or two different things that are very different from each other. Okay, so some people prefer BMWs. Those who disagree point out that Mercedes are more reliable. There's an example. All right, we must acknowledge, nevertheless, okay, we must acknowledge that politics in many parts of the world is becoming increasingly unpopular. Nevertheless, we don't seem to have any alternatives to the political world. Okay, no one can deny that there is a lot of poverty in the world. However, in many countries, there are quite a lot of active charities involved in helping those people. Okay, now many people hold the opinion that, whereas others believe, many people hold the opinion that German cars are outstanding in the world, and by far the best automobiles on the planet, whereas others believe that Japanese cars are actually the best cars in the world. All right, examples. Although it is hard to compete with countries like America, some people still prefer to live in small places like Bali. On the one hand, some people prefer to live in the countryside. On the other hand, some people prefer to live in the city. There are examples. Useful linking words. Okay, words to add points. This means you're adding another argument or another reason. Not only this, but also, here's another argument. Furthermore, in addition, moreover. Okay, words of disagreement. Although, however, nevertheless, even if, in spite of, okay, in spite of the previous statement, I still believe that this and this and this is true, okay? On the other hand, some people believe the opposite for these and these reasons. Okay. There are some functional words, just very, very simple words that, however, give us a specific function. Like, for example, words for examples. We use the word for example and then give an example of something that illustrates your point or reason or supports it. Others, for instance, means pretty much the same as example. In particular, here you're going to give an example that is specifically related to what you've just been talking about. Such as means you're going to give a list of 2 or 3 or more examples to show that, to support your point. To illustrate, you're probably going to give an explanation or give an example from real life experience. Words for results. Okay, obviously, as a result. As a result of what? As a result of these things, as a result of those things, as a result of these actions, as a result of those actions, we can see that blah, 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 blah. Therefore, okay, this is again kind of saying that, 2 and 2 is 4. Therefore, if we add these numbers in different ways, we will not get 4. Thus, again, to say that something is done in such and such a way. So, in this case, so means that you're continuing from a previous reason and leading towards a conclusion. In the end is like finally. So, after you've made your arguments, said most of the things, you can add a comment like, in the end, it really is up to all of us to contribute to this issue rather than neglect it and so on and so forth. Okay, some words for conclusions. I think you pretty much know these. We had some just now, like in the end, for example. Lastly, finally, to conclude, in short. Now, in short, here you're summarizing something. You're going to basically say, well, I've been talking about these things, but if I want to summarize it, I can say, in short, it's really about this. In conclusion, you're probably going to give your opinion, okay, and make some suggestions. In summary, similar to sum up. In summary, similar to in short. You're basically going to give a general statement summarizing the arguments in the previous paragraphs. The same thing with on the whole and all in all. Okay, some further important tips. Step 1, question analysis. Analyze the question, think about the keywords, be clear about the meanings. Okay, now sometimes there might be one word in the task question which you do not understand. Now that is significant. If it's an important word, that can really be a problem. So really try and guess as much as possible about what something is about. Now either the task statement or other keywords will give you a clue about what the meaning of that word might be. But make sure that you try and at least guess if you don't know what the meaning of a word is. Make sure you at least have some idea of the meaning of each of the key words. Okay, step 2, brainstorming. Okay, as I've explained, this is where you ask yourself questions about what you know and about what ideas you might have. So, decide whether you are for or against the opinion. That's the first step. Note down your ideas, which will include arguments. It is good to explore both sides of the argument, okay? So try and play the devil's advocate and try and, whatever your personal opinion might be, try and give both sides of the argument. Now, you might have a stronger paragraph if you're really for, but you still need to have a paragraph imagining what other people might say, what arguments they might have against your view. And always try and think of real-life examples that prove your point. Don't speak too academically or too abstractedly. See if you can think of examples in your experience which support or add to your points. Okay, the third step is planning. This means you have to organize your brainstorming and begin to turn it into a structured essay. Now that you have ideas, you can plan the layout of your essay. Use notepaper, of course, to sketch out your ideas. Think about what the main point of each paragraph is going to be. What is the main point? You really don't need more than 2, or you don't need more than 1, 2, sometimes 3 main points per paragraph. Because each of those main points needs to be supported by examples or details or other supporting evidence. So the next thing is, of course, list your supporting details or examples. Here's your main point. What supports your main point? An example from real life, maybe another argument, perhaps a detail, perhaps something you read in the newspaper. Okay, so when we finally get to the writing, now you have to support your opinions with reasons, examples, real life experience, that sort of thing. Okay, use real-life examples to prove your points. An argument is always stronger when you can use real-life examples or something you've read in the newspaper about similar points or issues. Use linking expressions to help the reader understand the direction of the essay. For example, you might say something like, however, or which signals you're going to give an opposing point of view. Or you might say something like additionally or further. Okay, this means you're going to make more points to support your argument or just come up with another argument. And finally, organize your paragraph according to your main points. So paragraphs, point 1, point 2, point 3, supporting points, or point 1, point 2, then supporting point 1, supporting point 2, supporting point 3, supporting point 4. It could be like that. There are 2 or 3 options. Okay, I'm going to give you an example of an essay structure. Okay, so for example, introduction. Here you have to explain the background of the issue. Okay, and paraphrase the task question. For example, in recent years, nowadays, over the past 20 years. Then you might have something, a paragraph, first body paragraph. It's a paragraph for or in favor. So these are arguments in favor of the topic. For example, some people think, they say, it's true that. You can begin this paragraph like this. Okay, 3, a paragraph against. Arguments against a topic. This is probably paragraph 2. For example, you can start with phrases like, on the other hand, other people would argue. One example of this is, and so on and so forth. And finally, a conclusion. Your own personal opinion based on all the arguments. Of course, you might also have a general statement and then explain your opinion. You might say something like, well, overall, having looked at both sides, I believe this, that, or the other. Or you might say, well, in conclusion, it is evident that the arguments for are much stronger than those against. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, there are some general strategies here. Okay, we've mentioned some of these things before, but identifying the issues. What are the key issues in the task topic? Let's say the task topic is the positive and negative sides of nuclear energy. You have to think about it more deeply. It's not just nuclear energy for electricity or nuclear energy for weapons of mass destruction. There's more to consider than that. For example, nuclear energy is much cheaper than, let's say, other kinds of energy, like coal produced energy. In fact, it's less polluting in the short run. So there are other things you have to think about, okay? You may be comparing nuclear energy to other kinds of ways of generating energy, like solar power, coal, gas, and so on and so forth. So think about the key issues more deeply. Try and look at more sides than just black and white. Okay, then after that, you need to be clear about what you're going to do. Okay, you're going to say to yourself, right, this is what I believe. This is my first paragraph. This is my second paragraph. These are the points I'm going to make in my first paragraph. These are the points I'm going to make in the second paragraph. Okay, so be clear and be bold. So when you're planning your answers, you need to identify the problems and the solutions. Okay, here's a problem with nuclear energy. Here's a possible solution. Here's a problem with this issue. Here's a possible solution. Okay, so try and think of solutions, because solutions especially will help you with your personal argument, what you personally agree with. Okay, there are some signaling phrases. These are, as I've said before, words like however, which signal that you're going to give an opposing view or give a different view or begin the arguments against in paragraph 2. Okay, so these can be linking words, as I said, such as however, finally. Finally is signaling that you're about to finish your essay or finish your argument. Okay, supporting your ideas. Now give details or examples from real life. Now another thing you need to think about is writing speed. You have to learn to manage your time and word count as well. All right, learn to understand your own writing. When you see like half a page of your own writing, you should be able to guess how many words that is just by looking at it. Okay, so get to understand your word writing, your handwriting style, your handwriting approach, and the kind of quantities that you're dealing with. Finally, you do have to assess your own writing. You need to allow a couple of minutes at least to review and check it at the end.